I'm really excited because I've been wanting to make this vegan meal prep for about a week now, and today we're going to make bean and rice burritos and Uncrustables. And we're also going to make some breadcrumbs using the leftovers from the bread that we make the Uncrustables with. Before I get started on any of that, I wanted to get started first on the Mexican rice. And even though the recipe that I was following didn't call for onions, I like the flavor that onions bring to the Mexican rice, so I decided to add them. I added about a quarter cup of chopped onions, and if you've been here a while, you already know that I like to pre-chop all of my onions and freeze them, which is why you saw there was a block of onion. It melts really quickly, don't worry. To that, I added a little bit of salt and a little bit of garlic powder. Then I added in my rinsed long grain rice. You can use whatever grain rice you have, but this is what I had on hand. And I always rinse my rice before I ever cook it. So if you do this too, great, go ahead and rinse your rice. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I highly recommend it if you like fluffy rice. I added now tomato paste, which is also not in the recipe because this is what I had on hand. Actually, tomato sauce is what was called for. This is a perfect example that you should use what you have on hand and not have to run to the store every time you need a specific ingredient. Look for alternatives. It makes it so much easier for you, and then you save money in the long run. Now the tomato paste wasn't dissolving very well. I added my 2 cups of water and tried to dissolve it with the wooden spoon, but it gave me a little bit of trouble, so I went in for the whisk. And that worked out pretty well. It was super simple to then dissolve all of the tomato paste. Once it started to boil, I covered it, put it on medium-low heat, and I simmered it for about 18 minutes. And that's it, Mexican rice ready to go. I also just preheated 2 cans of refried beans. Now you can absolutely make your refried beans from scratch and you'll actually save a lot more money that way. But this is another example to use what you have on hand. I have a ton of canned refried beans on hand, so I decided to make more space in my pantry by using those. And I'm measuring it out in about 1/4 cup because my tortilla ended up being really small. I should probably get some bigger tortillas next time I do this because you'll see I have a little bit of trouble with it later when I come to roll it. For reference, these are about medium-sized tortillas that I picked up from Costco, so I have a whole ton of them and I wanted to use them up. But for next time, I'm probably gonna go and get a bigger tortilla. They were a little hard to roll. You'll see me try to roll them in different ways to see what best works here, but it was a little difficult at first. That's the great thing about practice. You can continue to practice over and over again because at the end of the day, this is for you and your family. It's not for anyone else. So it doesn't have to look perfect. As long as it's tasty and your family will eat it, that's all that matters. At first, I tried to tuck in both sides. That didn't work very well. Then I thought about making it like the Taco Bell style burritos where it has one opening on one side, and that worked pretty well. It also came off looking a little bit bigger, and for me, when it looks bigger, I feel like I get more full. Is that just me? It must be just me. I'm a little weird. But if I see that something looks small, for some reason my stomach says, that's not gonna fill me up. Is that just me? Let me know in the comments. After I've rolled all of the burritos, I will individually wrap them in their own plastic wrap and then I'll put them in a freezer bag. Make sure you label your freezer bag with what's inside and the date that you made it. Because trust me when I tell you, when something is frozen, it does not look the same as when it's not. So sometimes you can confuse things if you don't properly label what you have in your freezer. And I speak from experience here. I have done this so many times where I've put something in the freezer thinking I'll know exactly what it is. Once it's frozen, it looks completely different and I have to wait to thaw it out in order for me to know what it is. I ended up making about 18 burritos, which is gonna last me at least 2 to 3 weeks. Next up, we're working on our Uncrustables. I'm gonna take off all of the crust from the bread and I'm going to put that aside because we're gonna use it in just a little bit. What's really cool is you can use very cheap white bread because the cheaper it is, the softer it is, which means that you can mold it to whatever you like. You can even use wheat bread here if that's something you're interested in. I just wanted to keep it as original to the Uncrustables as possible. I took about 1 tablespoon of regular creamy peanut butter, the sugar-free kind, and strawberry preserves, also 1 tablespoon. What's really great is you can customize this. So if you like chunky peanut butter, you can add that. If you like a different type of jelly, like grape jelly, strawberry jelly, marmalade even, you can add whatever you want. And even with customizing it, you can still save money because you're not buying Uncrustables at a premium. So it's a win-win, budget friendly and totally customizable. Also, super easy to recreate. The entire process probably took me about 5 minutes, and it was so simple, and I know that I'm just going to do this over and over again from now on. So many of you suggested this really cool gadget that you can get off of Amazon, and it's not that expensive to be able to cut and mold your Uncrustables. I'm thinking of getting it for the next time. But if you don't have one and you're like me, you can absolutely do this with just a cup that you have on hand and then just cut around it. And don't worry, those scraps are going to be coming to good use too. Now, just like I did with the burritos, I'm going to wrap each one individually in plastic wrap and then put it in a freezer bag. I always like to wrap it separately and then also add it into a freezer bag so there's extra protection when it goes in the freezer. And the best way to freeze any of the things that you're going to store longer term is to flatten out whatever it is that you're freezing. That way you can stack things on top of each other and they're space savers rather than taking up valuable real estate in your freezer. The entire loaf actually made 10 Uncrustables, but one was a little busted because it was the very first one that I made, and so that was a perfect excuse for me to taste my snack. And of course, we're going to use all of that crust to make breadcrumbs. So I'm just putting it in a food processor here, and we're going to chop it up as fine or as coarse as you want it to be. Then we're going to pop it in the oven so that it can dry out a little bit. I like to do this before it gets dry just because it actually gives me a more consistent crumb. I'm going to drop that into a sheet pan and put it in the oven at 200 degrees for about 15 minutes or until it starts to dry out. Remember, you don't want to add any color here so that it doesn't burn when you actually use it in your cooking later. You just want it to dry out so that it doesn't have any moisture in it. This will help it keep longer as well. Here you can see the crumbs have started to dry very well. I'm also going to leave it overnight so that it dries even more. And here's a really cool trick. Instead of me trying to use a funnel, I'm putting the crumbs on parchment paper so that I can just funnel it into the mason jar that I have. Another example of using what you have on hand and making the most of what you have in your kitchen. And that's it for today's video. We've made Uncrustables, bean and rice burritos, and breadcrumbs from scratch. I'm so glad that you were here with me and that we could cook together, and I hope that this serves as inspiration for you to use what you have on hand, start recreating the meals that you love, and have conveniences waiting for you in your freezer and pantry that you can use on busy nights. Before you go, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our new videos that come out. Every Tuesday, we're going to have a new video with cooking inspiration, motivation, tips and tricks and strategies to help you save money, feed your family well, and have more money you can use for things you love. Talk to you later.